to Morbid Memories with Tom and Mary. I just had a massive go at you off camera, but it's good to see you. It's good to see you. Well, we're doing Harold and Maude today. Um, Weird story. Uh, but a beautiful story. Beautiful and
Yes.
weird. Like pretty much everything that we do on this podcast, Mary. Why are we doing this?
We're doing this because this is one of my favorite movies and it's my birthday this month, so I get to do whatever I want. So,
Yeah, you
yeah,
do.
I wanted to discuss this one because it is an incredibly beautiful and I think unique movie. There really
Yeah.
isn't a lot like it out there.
No.
It's a movie about life and death and problematic age gap relationships, and it's just always been a special one to me since I saw it. My dad brought home a copy of it when I was in high school, as he said, "You'll like this," and just put it on for me, and I was like blown away because I'd never seen anything like it. So
Yeah, I think the same. I mean, I'm not really big into older films. I'm fickle with my film taste, but actually the story really captivated me. I think this is one that a lot of people in the UK and a lot of people around the world, of course, have heard of. If they've not seen it, they've heard of the story. And I think that was the case for me. I was like, I'd heard of Harold and Maude, but not seen it. And then actually watching this, it really struck a chord with me. And as it has done again with people around the globe. I mean, you mentioned the problematic age gap. Is age just a number? Do you mind an age gap, Mary?
I think it's one of those situations where context matters a lot. And I think it's like in this film, it works because when you watch the film, it doesn't seem like Maude sets out from a place of trying to groom Harold or anything like that. It's just sort of the way things naturally progress over the course of it. It's weird when you remember that this entire film takes place over the course of a week. It feels like it should
Yeah,
be longer than that.
yeah.
Um, and I think it's important to remember, this film was made in 1971, and attitudes towards age gaps were different then than they are now. I mean, obviously they play with that in the film because that age gap's large enough that, many of the other side characters in the film have a problem with the concept because it's not within a realm that would be considered normal. And I
Hmm.
think also because they flip things like, usually when you see those kind of age gaps in film and it's an older man and a younger woman, so flipping that the other way was an unusual choice, which I think is part of what makes it interesting as well.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. I think the other question I had for you, Mary, before we sort of delve into some of the facts that you've researched that I want to touch on is, you know, um, should one be as playful as Maud is as an 80-year-old woman? As someone with a disability who is approaching 40 and was told, when I was a kid that I wasn't going to be walking around at all, and then more recently it's like, oh, you won't make it to 40 on your feet, and then I'm 39 and I'm still going. It's like, obviously it's important for me to maintain, motivation, but also just be flexible, be as busy as I possibly can be, and that is, I'm not making a direct comparison between myself and the incredible actress who plays Maud, of course.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm saying those themes relate to me, and I think, what does it communicate to you about age? And again, age is just a number again. Should does this film encourage people of all ages to embrace life? Because that's what it feels like to me, to embrace life and love right up until the age of 80, despite societal challenges, restrictions, because that is fundamentally, at the core of the film, sort of a rejection of conformity, authority, and a rejection of almost as simple as embracing life over death, Mary.
I've always kind of considered the character of Maud to be like old lady goals anyway, maybe, without the stealing cars part. But I think that her character is great because she doesn't really let her age slow her down, and she just lives her life to the fullest. And I think a lot of that is her backstory is not super clear in the film, but you do see that she was a Holocaust survivor. She had a tattoo that would have placed her in the labor camps at Auschwitz. So it's her character very much seems to have been impacted by those experiences, and her philosophy is just to live life to the fullest because you don't know how long you've got. And nothing does last forever, so she just tries to live life to the fullest and like have new experiences every day, and just live on her own terms. And I think that there's something that definitely is admirable and something that I would certainly aspire to in that characterization. Just and I think for you and I, there is like we do love a sort of anti-conformity attitude to begin with, like judgment of the world be damned kind of thing. So I think it has appeal in that way.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right, and I think that's really important to recognize. For people that maybe they might have a little bit of anxiety around watching the film. Or apprehension is probably the correct word. Because maybe again it's of a certain time, of a certain age, but also there's certain themes in there. But there's a lot of sort of dark comedy in there as well. There's so much about this relationship that is beautiful. The ending we'll talk about in a little while, but just again the way that Maude steals the cars, and kind of her just distaste for distaste for authority. My favorite scene is the sort of police chase scene. I think that's fantastic. How long have you been driving? Oh, that's 45 minutes. So wouldn't you say? I thought that was lovely. Harold, I think, appeals to the inner goth in everybody, where like there's a fascination with death.
I mean, I think there is something relatable in Harold's character. I mean, he's young. I think he's depending on in the movie he's supposed to be about 20. I think in the novelization
Yeah,
here
he looks super young. He looks
he's like
super young.
19, so he's very young. He's grown up in an upper class household. His father is dead. His mother is domineering but doesn't really pay attention to him.
Mm.
So he's acting out as a way of getting attention because as he talks about in the film, it's the only time his mother's really displayed much care for him was like when she thought he was dead. So he begins acting this out over and over again, which is definitely sort of a rebellion and cry for attention. And just as a character, like Harold doesn't seem to have a place in the world. He doesn't have responsibilities. He's just sort of floating around. He doesn't have, outside of Maude, any friends really. So it's just kind of like this alienated character who, he's clearly intelligent and he has an odd sense of humor, but just hasn't found a space in the world. And he's clearly depressed, not truly suicidal, but he's just like play acting these death scenes for attention. But he's definitely not got much in life to cling to at the beginning of the film.
Do you think there's something about the romanticization of of death, and also, I guess, alternative relationships within the sort of he's a younger guy from this sort of privileged background, obviously gone through some challenges. But I was talking with someone the other day about how easy it is for people with a certain amount of privilege to access these, again, to be able to be a little bit more playful with death, and to be able to be a little bit more playful with the alternative, because they can be afforded the time, and they can be afforded the chance to be more, I guess, more goth, more weird. you know does that make sense? It's a bit of a weird point, but like people, do you think there's something in this where if Harold didn't come from where he came from, would he have embraced the weird so much? Would he have been so fascinated with more? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think, well, for one thing, if he was from a working class background and, as a young man had to actually work for a living, he wouldn't have as much time to stage his own death and hang around with Maude. So he's definitely enabled by that privilege. And I mean, like neglectful parents can happen at any economic strata, but like, it's established in the film that he was like sent off to boarding school. yeah, as a kid and things like that. So it's like I think he's much more alienated from his parents than a lot of or parent than a lot of people from a more working class background would be, because it's not the norm for people in the US like below like a pretty high income level to be sent to boarding school in the
Mm.
first place, and even then it's actually fairly unusual. So I think that yeah, it's just his family's economic background does definitely play a huge role in his fascination with death and his ability to explore that for sure.
Do you think that goth, is a privilege really to be able to dress, because obviously it's like, on a wider scale, it's an expensive, clothing style. It's an expensive hobby to be a goth, and
Can be.
actually, yeah, and actually, is it something that only a certain class of people can afford, and the privilege to, I guess, be weird,
I
because
mean, I think that there's levels to that, because I don't come from this. I
yeah.
don't come from a wealthy background, but it's you can find black clothing in any economic bracket, but you might not be able to afford Doc Martens. That's kind of what that ends up boiling down to.
Mm.
So it's like having wealth makes it easier, but for someone who's just into that aesthetic, I think that it can be done on any budget. And then when I was younger, I spent a lot of time digging through thrift shops looking for pieces, and just like finding whatever fit the aesthetic, in like regular working class type department stores and things like
Yeah.
that. It just, yeah, but I definitely spent a lot of time longing for those expensive Doc Martin boots
Yeah,
and like the higher end
yeah,
items that I couldn't afford, and
yeah.
still don't have. But Doc Martin, I am willing to sell out if you'd like to send me boots. So
Yeah, the sponsorship. Yeah, there we go. We go for that sponsorship. I don't know. I always think you're one of the most stylish people I've ever met, Mary. So I think you're doing pretty well.
yeah, I think that if you have to cob it together on a shoestring budget, it makes you work harder for it. You learn how to do it. So
100%, 100%. eBay has become my friend for goth stuff in more recent years, second and third hand. But just because you can get some pretty good deals on there, and Emma swears by Vinted as well. I don't know if you get, yeah, that's a thing too. You can get some really good second and third hand clothes on there. Anyway, we've gone way off topic, but it was just because like my friend, I was talking to my friend, as we were going to band practice the other day, and he was saying like, yeah, being goth is cool and everything, but if you go to a British public school, you're just going to be called n numerous names. If you start wearing nail varnish and eyeliner and buying fancy clothes, you're just going to be called names. So it's harder for people from that background to want to do it, because
mhm.
they're just going to get bullied, especially younger people.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I think yeah, there's definitely in the US education system on and off, there's been a lot of that. I mean, and like I was fortunate enough to be in school at a time when alt fashion was
yeah.
somewhat popular. So and I think it's different for girls than boys, because it's like girls, you don't tend to get people joking about like you being sort of a lone weirdo in the same way
Mm.
in school that you do with the boys. And I also was just willing to yell at people, so
Yeah.
that made
Yeah, no, yeah, I got it pretty bad, but also for me it was an escape. It was for obviously
mm-hmm.
people would stare at me anyway because of the sticks or whatever. So it was like an escape. But anyway, I think these questions, going back to the point of our podcast, this is gonna be a fun one to edit. If we go back to the point of our podcast, I think that theme comes up because again, this kid is so weird, and he's got all these weird fascinations, but he comes from this quite, again, you could see it in the film, quite and the mother is very dominating and sort of tells him how to be and tries to arrange his dates and tries to arrange his wives, and I think but it's an interesting point of conversation. If anybody listening and watching can follow our trains of thought, our very neurodivergent trains of thought, but please do put your points in the comments. Is goth a privilege, is I guess the overarching question there. But back to the point, Mary, some much more serious themes, in this. Like I said, you mentioned, people have referred to Harold and Maude as a Holocaust film in the past. Again, there are references to it as well, and I think it has a much wider, historical significance because of that. In terms of other facts that you brought into the research, we tend to look at films with a strong musical connection, of course.
Mhm.
I thought it was really, really interesting. There was a connection to Cat Stevens in this film. Uh,
Mhm.
you put the effort in to do the research. Obviously, that there's a couple of good, Cat Stevens stories from this film, Mary. If you'd like to elaborate on those.
Yeah, well, it's the whole soundtrack pretty much. There's a few classical pieces that are featured in the film, but the vast majority of it is all compositions by Cat Stevens. Because he was originally they had been talking to Elton John to do the music for the film, and I guess had even considered him for the role of Harold, but he backed out of the project and had suggested to Hal Ashby, the actor, that they talk to Cat Stevens. So they end up using his music for the film, which is it's mostly songs from Tea for the Tillerman and Mona Bone Jacone are the albums, and then there's two songs that he wrote specifically for the film. But I think that I love this soundtrack. This is what got me into Cat Stevens in the first place was this film, and I think that it sets the tone nicely because a lot of the subject matter in his songs just seem to fit well with what's happening in the film. Anyone who hasn't, I highly recommend Tea for the Tillerman. It is just a solid album from start to finish. I love that album. And I found that interesting. He also even has a cameo in the film during the outdoor funeral scene where Maude's trying to get Harold's attention. The bearded gentleman in the green hat is actually Cat Stevens giving her dirty looks, which is fun because I didn't know that until I started researching for this. I didn't realize that was him. So
Yeah, yeah, very,
I
very
found
cool.
that fun.
Very cool, very, very cool little moment in in this, Cat Stevens, legendary musician and artist as well. The other fact that I really liked in this was that Ruth Gordon driving whenever Ruth Gordon is driving, she's actually being towed because she never learned how
Mm-hmm.
to drive. I thought that was fantastic. As a terrible driver myself, I wish I could be towed everywhere.
Yeah.
Mary, that'd be great. Yeah, yeah.
I think yeah, it's all the close-ups. She's being towed. The farther out shots, I think it was a body double that they were using, like a stunt driver. As obviously she didn't learn to drive. She was not drifting a hearse around corners or anything. But I do love her particular brand of awful driving
Yeah,
so
yeah.
much in this film.
I relate to that so much. I think that's why the police chase is my favorite scene. I just relate to, as you've been in a car with me. I'm not improved in the last 20 years. I'm
I've been in
still,
a car accident with you.
yeah, yeah. I'm still lucky to be alive, and other people are as well. Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I was remembering that the other day. Actually, yeah, got some
When we
quite.
almost got crushed by the bus.
Yeah, we got some good stories, me and you.
Yeah, plenty of adventures.
We're both lucky to be here on Morbid Movies. Yeah, it's great. In terms of favorite scene, which we tend to do this sort of admin bit. There's a couple in there. Of course, the heart-wrenching bit, and I do think people probably get lost a little bit. In the quality of Ruth Gordon's acting versus Bud Cort. Bud Cort, his emotion on that sort of towards the end where he thinks he's going to lose Maud, when he's playing Harold and the tears and they're in the ambulance and she's taken the sleeping pills, was a real, testament to Bud Cort's acting. That
Oh
would be
yeah.
probably my second favorite scene. My first, again, I've mentioned is the car chase, just because again the comedy is great too. It's simple, very simple comedy, but the way that she's so carefree is, um, well, it's just fantastic, isn't it?
Ruth Gordon kind of has that quality in everything I've ever seen her in. Is I mean, she was also in Every Which Way But Loose and Rosemary's Baby, and also a very great episode of Columbo. If anyone enjoys old detective shows, and she just kind of brings that energy to things, like just like sort of a peppy little old lady energy that like works so well for this film, and I think it plays great against Bud Cort's acting because like he's a great actor and he does, you know, Harold starts as such a repressed character and by the end is, you know, displaying so much more emotion
Yeah.
because he's really been loosened up by his time with Maude. So yeah, I agree that is like a very powerful scene towards the end.
Yeah, absolutely. So would you call that your favorite scene, Mary, or do you have another one?
You know, it's hard to pick in this film because it's such a great film, but I also really love the scene when he has that first blind date and he like, you know, scares her off, and then there's that moment where he like breaks the breaks the fourth wall and like smirks at the camera and then looks back at his mother and the expression just completely changes because he realizes, you know, he's in trouble. And it's like such a subtle facial expression change, but it cracks me up every single time. And I love all the date scenes actually because they're just unhinged.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, a very unhinged character, well played by Cort. Yeah, this film also makes me really want to drive a hearse. I knew a guy who drove a hearse. Um,
Yeah, this I definitely wanted one, and like the hearse in that film at the time was just like an old cheap car, but has become highly collectible in more recent years, and they're pretty valuable now because it is really a beautiful car as
yeah,
well.
yeah.
And I also love the way he that Jaguar his mother gives him, he just turns it into another hearse.
Yeah,
That reveal is so funny.
yeah, it's so cool, and again, just a testament to the quality of this film. And once again, as with all the films that you bring and we bring to this podcast, we would recommend people check it out, and please do try if you're up for it, do engage with us because that's what keeps the podcast going. Before we round up, then Mary, with we'll do the favorite performance question. Is there any other facts that you bought that you'd like to mention? Because there are quite a few here that you've bought, and
Yeah.
they're all very, very valid and important.
One of the things that I would like to mention that is another one of those like subtle little jokes in the film is I love the way Harold frequently like when he's meeting the psychiatrist, he dresses the same way as him, or like the first time he goes to see his uncle, he does that really slicked down side part hairstyle. Like he mirrors the people around him as sort of a subtle dig when he has to deal with authority. And I always found the subtlety of that quite funny.
Yeah, that's really. I actually made a point, and I'm really glad you brought that up. I made a point of bringing that up to you because I hadn't read into it as much as and I think it's a really clever little psychological point, especially
Yeah,
in
there's
especially in the
just
context where they're trying to fix him, they're trying to figure out what's
mhm.
up, but actually he's playing. It feels almost like Harold is playing the character of Harold is playing them.
Hmm.
It-
Yeah, he kind of, in weird, subtle ways, holds a mirror up to the people he has to deal with. And there's also just like a lot of weird little background gags in this film, like outside the funeral when the marching band just happens to be going by, and it just is such a strange tone for the scene. Or when they go to that park that's like full of old veterans and one just falls over behind them and nobody seems to notice, just like these strange little things that are tucked in there. And I just sort of enjoy the odd humor in the film quite a bit.
Yeah, yeah, it was very, again, very, very cleverly done. I think there was a lot of little, I suppose the term would be Easter eggs in terms of the scenes, little things like that, little nuances that I think are really, really clever in this. And like I say, if we've missed anything that you think, that you as an audience, I think we should address, we can always do a separate video or address it next video because I think it's important because we might miss stuff. We tend to come into these, fresh off watching the film, kind of again stream of consciousness. So we may miss things, but yeah, I think some really clever
it's
little
it's hard
points.
to address everything because there's so many subversive little elements to this film, though, that we would need a much longer episode to comb through all of it.
Indeed, indeed, and again, one of our big admin questions is, of course, favorite performer. Don't want to assume. Obviously, I would say, how can you not say Ruth Gordon? But where would you stand on favorite performer, Mary?
I think it's got to be Ruth Gordon. And obviously, this is no shade to Bud Cort, but it just because her character is such a lively sparkly, almost bordering on being like a manic pixie dream woman kind of character. It's like she just stands out, and I don't know, I love Ruth Gordon's energy so much. Like she really is little old lady goals, as I said, just fantastically chipper about
Yeah,
everything. I don't know,
yeah.
she's adorable.
Absolutely, absolutely, gotta love it, and I'm sure, many people, around the world, over the last, 30, 40 years, have all admired the character of Maude. Maybe some, more than others, in the context of the film. She's quite a bubbly personality, which is very attractive. You know what I mean? It's a, um, you can see why this film plays on the subversion of those stereotypes and situations, because you can see why the character of Maud is so attractive in
Oh
terms of
yeah.
character. You can see why people are fascinated by her, because it's so free. I guess the manic, exactly as you say, the manic pixie dream woman. I guess it's an interesting topic. Maybe we could do a video on manic pixie dream
Yeah,
characters. Yeah,
I think she barely escapes the designation just because she does have some backstory and motivation of her own, and because she does do things of her own agency and
yeah,
not just for the male character. So she doesn't quite fall into the trope, but she comes so dangerously close to it.
yeah, yeah.
In the role that she plays in Harold's life, but I think they do a great job of subverting so many tropes in this film.
Yeah, absolutely. I do want to. I was just doing a little bit of research of my own. I do want to note that I think from a production standpoint, there's an inspirational note on this film where it was a UCLA film school student, obviously Colin Higgins, who wrote Harold and Maude as his master's thesis, and this was turned into the film. And he was working as a pool boy for the producer, and he then showed the producer's wife, and then that ended up getting into the hands of Paramount. And while Higgins didn't end up directing the thing, it just goes to show you that I think he was a producer on it. Just goes to show you that opportunities can come out of nowhere. You just got to grab them. You know what I mean? Because
Yeah.
even in the 70s, your idea that you come up with for a masters can then be turned into a film. I think
Yeah.
and I think
I kind of
there's been theatrical adaptations as well. So I think it's interesting.
Yeah. I kind of feel like there was more, at least in the American Hollywood context, there was even more opportunity for that back then, because like we've had a huge consolidation in the last couple decades in terms of studios. There used to be a lot more independent studios, a lot more working class voices in film, and unfortunately, it's harder to break through. There's less studios, and less opportunities for people who aren't already well connected. There's a lot of nepo babies in Hollywood these days of
And
varying quality. So
indeed,
I think that's part of why I end up pulling a lot of older films up, is it's you don't get a lot of these like smaller cult film situations these days because there's less companies there to fund them and less opportunity.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
do like, I'm glad you did bring that up there, because I think it's great that this was such a like rags to riches kind of situation getting this film made. Not that it did well in the box office necessarily at the time, but it's become a very important cult
Yeah,
film over the years, like recognized later.
yeah, and I think that's important. I was just, I was watching the Toxic Avenger remake with, and obviously they just brought that out, Kevin Bacon and Peter Dinklage and stuff, and obviously the trauma stuff, by definition is so, I think they make those films for very small budgets, but of course
Mm-hmm.
the cult standing of those films is exceptional and global. So
Oh,
you
absolutely.
don't need, and maybe this is because we're doing a podcast where we jump on Zoom and minimal editing, etc. But I think it's important that you do, not to sound too cheesy as to older people, I guess. You know, you should still do the thing. If you want to
Oh,
do the thing, you should
absolutely.
still do the thing. Come up with a script. Write a play. Do a podcast. Yeah, everyone can be like, oh yeah, millions of people have a podcast. Yeah, that's cool, but doesn't mean you shouldn't try your own thing.
And
So
we're better looking than the rest of them too.
oh man, don't put that out into the world. God, we'll get so much hate, but no, if that works. It's lovely of you. It's lovely of you to say, and I do think you look very, very cool, Mary. So,
Right.
whatever anybody else thinks, fuck you guys. We're happy doing this podcast, and yeah, I think Mary is the coolest looking mother flipper out there. And I thank you for saying that. I've had a crisis of confidence this weekend, so it's lovely to have your compliment. I'm not even going to edit this out. We're just going to have a big self-aggrandizing section of this podcast where we're both like, we're awesome and we're
Yeah,
beautiful
we stand
people.
by that.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. We're awesome. Anything else that you would like to touch on?
Yeah, I think that we've covered it without giving too much away. And this is saying, if you haven't seen the film, you should definitely go find it and watch it, because it's fantastically unique. And if you don't like it, then whatever. But you should like it because it's great.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you're watching this at 80, you can do anything you want. If you want to do it badly enough, and if you're watching this at 12 or 16, probably, or whatever age you are, who knows who's watching this? You can do anything you want to, because why the not? Um, yeah. I think this is a good example of that in the characters and the backstory. Mary, where can people find us? What are we doing next?
Right. Oh,
It's September,
so
right? So we're going into full spooky season. Next episode
right.
will be spooky season. Yeah.
So for spooky season, yeah, we talked a little behind the scenes about that. You made some suggestions, and I'm leaning towards doing Spawn for spooky
Holy
season because I think
yeah.
that one will be fun to talk about in all of its Spawn glory.
The
So
greatest soundtrack of all time ever
that
in
is a bold
history.
claim. We will have to discuss further.
Yeah, yeah, they're remaking it too. So I think they're remaking it anyway. They're remaking everything, but I loved it. But I also thought it was a terrible film, but also a brilliant film in so many other ways. Yeah,
It's a great terrible film. So I
yeah,
thought
yeah,
that one will be fun. So we'll do that. So contact info before we forget. You can email us at morbidmoviepod@gmail.com. We're on Instagram at morbid movies podcast, on Twitter at Morbid Movies Pod, TikTok at morbid.movies.pod, and we're on Blue Sky at Morbid Movies. It's hard to
yeah.
say that.
It is. Yeah, we're gonna figure out over the next couple of months about getting an outro like a proper professional podcast. But for now, Mary, what do we say to people who are watching? Apart from thank you for watching, what do we
Yeah.
tell them?
Yeah, it's thank you for watching and keep it spooky.
Awesome. Keep it spooky, everybody. Bye.
Bye.